Hello everyone, I'm Igor and today I wanted to talk about the development of my game called Restless Grounds, which I released about 3 months ago for free on Steam. I thought it might be interesting for some people to see how does the process of making such a game actually looks like. So first, a little bit about my background. I've been making games in Unity for 3 or 4 years now, but I could never finish any more ambitious project. But I spent a lot of time working on first-person shooters, so I had the most experience in that type of game. So at first, Restless Grounds was supposed to be a third-person Silent Hill inspired game. You were a soldier in the trenches where one monster would hunt you, kinda like Alien Isolation, and he would give you hints or even possibly lie to you through the radio. I very quickly scrapped that idea and leaned towards something I'm more comfortable with, which were first-person shooters. I was really inspired by Cry of Fear and its slower combat, but most importantly, the idea of being stuck in a city full of monsters. To be honest, that idea was hunting me down ever since I started making games, so I decided to set the game in Poland, which is my home country, exactly in the 80s, during the martial law. This setting isn't really used much in video games, apart from, of course, some indie games from Poland. Definite highlights are Holstein and Funeral Police. Other big inspiration, although not Polish but rather Czech, was Hrot. Its use of Czech culture memes really gives the game a deep personal and authentic feel. I think it's the biggest reason I like games made by solo developers or small teams. It's that authenticity, and I wanted to achieve something similar with the Restless Grounds. A really big inspiration were secret Soviet bases hidden in Polish woods that were around during that time. I've been really captivated by their existence. You were supposed to traverse the city, then the woods, and then into that hidden base, but I shrinked that idea down. Well, the whole game feels like a demo or just a small bite of something that could have been much greater, and many people that played Restless Grounds feel the same. So the art style is something I'm really proud of, and I think it turned out pretty good. The game has a low-poly, retro-stylized 3D models. The props, enemies, NPCs and important game elements are all done in Blender, and I hand-painted the textures, giving them a slight cartoon-like feel. And the in-engine outline shader also gives them what I call Władcy art style. It's just its own thing with its modern lighting, low poly, low res textures and this cartoonish feel. It's subjective, but I find the stylized retro far more appealing. The level geometry is done in Unity using Pro Builder, and there the textures are more realistic and detailed. Each of course carefully edited to fit the game. There are many references to the Polish pop culture and jokes. And the soundtrack, although not impressive and rather repetitive, is done by me. So the gameplay twist on the first-person shooter is very simple, but actually has some deeper meaning and thought behind it. When you reload your gun, you have to load each bullet with a button press. This forces you to change the playstyle when you run out of ammo. Either hide and load the rounds, or dash around enemy projectiles. This was the intended way of playing. Many people didn't like that approach, and the fact that the movement is a bit slower does not make it as obvious, so that's definitely my mistake. The game took around 9 months to make. I used some things that I already made for the other first-person shooters, although I reworked most of them to work in this new setting. Mainly the player movement, gun logic and the enemy state machine. You know, really the backbones of the entire game. The dialogue system is something I spent a lot of time making, and I think it turned out pretty good. You wouldn't wanna make a game like Witcher 3 with this, but for my use it's more than enough. Dialogues can have different responses, and the game supports language localization. The game was first wrote in English, as I initially didn't wanted the localization system, but I ended up making it anyways, so I added the Polish translation. The system is very scalable and adding new languages is extremely easy. Throughout the development, I mainly had a problem with level design, and the game ended up way too linear. The biggest issue actually came up at the end of the development. This was optimization. The level geometry used way too much draw calls. Draw calls are basically your CPU telling your graphics card to render a frame, and when there are too many of them, the CPU usually bottlenecks those calls and you end up with a laggy game. I partially fixed this with batching the elements that were the same, but many buildings had a slight variation and could not be batched. Also, they used many materials on one mesh, which multiplied the draw calls even further. So one mesh with, let's say, 4 different materials would be 4 draw calls. I ended up making that if you progressed the game, the previous location would just disappear, which was really lazy and, to be honest, done just before the release. Yeah, the release. I launched the game with around 250 wishlists, which is really not a lot. At the time of recording this, 1700 people have actually played the game. There are 98 reviews and 87% of them are positive. I'm happy with those numbers as I had very little marketing. I mainly posted on Twitter and trailers on YouTube. I am definitely planning on making a new game similar to Restless Grounds, but I think finding a publisher would really help. When you're making a game on your own, the stress of marketing, the statistics really get to you mentally. This was pretty hard and stressful 9 months, but I don't regret anything, to be honest. Well, in the end, I think the story is a little bit over the top and over political, but there is nothing I can do now, and maybe it was meant to be like that. Most importantly, the game is not soulless, and I think that's the biggest achievement of this project. Thank you for watching.